morning, fellas. Welcome to an episode of TSAN After Dark. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Kennedy and Lincoln connection, which is the conspiracy theory that there is a connection between John F. Kennedy's assassination and Abraham Lincoln's assassination. This theory is based on several coincidences that occur between the life and death of JFK and Abraham Lincoln. So we're going to run down the list of coincidences, and we're going to see if we can decide whether this is a conspiracy or coincidence. The first connection between President Lincoln and President Kennedy is that their last names each have 7 letters. This is a true statement. However, I don't think it's indicative of anything. I think that is pure coincidence. However, it is true. The next coincidence is that Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, and JFK was elected to Congress in 1946, 100 years apart exactly. And this is true. The next coincidence, Lincoln was elected to the presidency in 1860, and Kennedy was elected to the presidency in 1960. Again, this is true. Both Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy married women in their 20s, while they themselves were in their 30s. Again, this is true. Both presidents during their time in the White House each lost a son. Abraham Lincoln lost his 11-year-old son, and JFK lost his infant son. This is a true fact. Now, this one's a little interesting. Both of their sons, who they lost during their time in the White House, had 21 letters in their name. 7 letters in their first name, 7 letters in their middle name, 7 letters in their last name. I thought that was an interesting tidbit. Both Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy were assassinated while they were with their wives. Abraham Lincoln at the theater, watching a play with his wife. John F. Kennedy during the parade in Dallas, driving in a car with his wife. It's a true statement. Now, to compare the assassins just a little bit, the connection has been drawn that John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839, and Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. This is a false statement. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1838. The numbers have been fudged on that statistic just to draw more parallels that aren't there. Both assassins were known by 3 names: Lee Harvey Oswald, John Wilkes Booth. And each of their names add up to 15 letters. This is partially true, as Lee Harvey Oswald was only known by his 3 names after he assassinated President Kennedy. One of the most common connections that people point to here is that John Wilkes Booth ran from Ford's Theater and was caught in a warehouse, and Lee Harvey Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Neither one of these statements are completely true, as John Wilkes Booth was caught in a farm in Virginia, not a warehouse. In the statement about Lee Harvey Oswald, they say that he ran from the Dealey Plaza warehouse, when in fact he ran from the Texas School Book Depository warehouse where he worked. The next connection is that Abraham Lincoln was the runner-up for vice president in 1856, and John F. Kennedy was the runner-up for vice president in 1956, once again 100 years apart. And this is a true statement. Lincoln only received 13% of the vote for vice presidency. John F. Kennedy received 43% of the vote for vice presidency. But neither one of them ended up winning their party's nomination. The next statement claims that both assassins were Southerners. John Wilkes Booth from Maryland, somehow considered Southern, and Lee Harvey Oswald from New Orleans, Louisiana, which you can't get any more Southern than New Orleans. So it's not completely true that John Wilkes Booth is a Southerner, as he was from Maryland. However, he was a Confederate sympathizer, which is the reason why the assassination took place. So this is a partially true statement. After the assassinations, both presidents had been succeeded by their vice presidents, and there are some connections that connect those 2 vice presidents. Firstly, they were both Southerners, which is true. Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee, and Lyndon B. Johnson was from Texas. Both Andrew Johnson and Lyndon B. Johnson were Democrats, also true. I don't think that draws any more special conclusions, but it is a fact that they were both Democrats. Both presidential successors had the last name Johnson. That is also a fact. Both successors had 6 letters in their first name: Andrew Johnson and Lyndon B. Johnson. Also a fact. This one is a little bit more interesting Andrew Johnson was born in 1808, and Lyndon B. Johnson was born in 1908. Both Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy were heavily involved in the civil rights movements of their times, with Abraham Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation, making slavery illegal, and John F. Kennedy being heavily involved in the civil rights movement of the 60s. That's another fact. And one could argue that those are the reasons that they were assassinated. Both Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy were shot in the head on a Friday and died at nearby locations. That is also true. It is said that Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy that warned him not to go to the theater that night. And it is said that Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln that warned him not to go to Dallas to be a part of the parade. One of these statements has been ruled false, as there is no record of Abraham Lincoln having a secretary by the name of Kennedy. However, he did receive a warning from one of his footmen, whatever that is, that he should not be going to the theater that night. But it is true that JFK had a secretary named Lincoln that warned him not to go to Dallas. And his secretary was a woman whose husband's nickname was Abe. I think his real name was Harold, though. Both of the assassins, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, were killed before they could stand trial. That is a fact. John Wilkes Booth was found in a barn in Virginia, and he was killed during a standoff. Lee Harvey Oswald was killed while he was in police custody by a man named Jack Ruby, which, doing a little bit more digging there, it seemed that Jack Ruby could have been involved in organized crime, which might piece together that puzzle a little bit more. Maybe in a future After Dark video. Keep an eye out for that one. So looking at all these connections, I think that there's too many for it to be a complete coincidence. However, the quantity of connections is too much to be a coincidence, but the quality of these connections is very poor. For example, I don't think you can draw parallels between two people based on how many letters are in their name. I don't think it points to a conspiracy when two people are exactly 100 years apart in presidency, especially when we only elect a new president every 4 years. But some of the connections are very interesting, like them both being runner-up for vice presidency 4 years before they were elected to presidency, and the fact that they were both involved in civil rights, which I think is pretty clear that it had a lot to do with why they were both assassinated. I think it is most likely just an unfortunate coincidence that they both lost a son while living in the White House. I do think it's interesting that both of their sons each had 21 letters in their name between first, middle, and last. I think that's interesting, but I don't think that that points to a conspiracy. And then them both being assassinated while with their wives. I mean, if you just look at presidents now, I'd say 8 to 9 times out of 10, they're by their wife's side. So if you're going to see a president, you're going to see his wife there with him, especially when he's making a public appearance. It is interesting to me that people will change dates and small facts to push this conspiracy a little bit more, like trying to say that John Wilkes Booth was actually born in 1839 when he was indeed born in 1838, and just inventing a secretary for Lincoln named Kennedy that doesn't exist in any public records, just to push this theory more. And then the connection between Lincoln being shot in Ford's theater and Kennedy being shot in a Ford car. I mean, if you think about it in the 60s, if somebody's going to be in a car, it's like a Chevy or Ford situation. It's a 50-50. So I've always been intrigued by the connection between JFK and Abe Lincoln. However, after doing all this research, I've been convinced that everything is just a coincidence. Some of it is a very interesting coincidence, but still just coincidence. I do not think that there is a direct correlation between JFK and Abe Lincoln. However, this conspiracy has gotten me to do some research and learn more about the assassinations of both men, which takes me way back, because I first learned about this connection, this conspiracy, when I was in high school. My U.S. history teacher, Mrs. Braun, she had a poster on her wall that highlighted some of these connections, and that's where I first heard about this conspiracy. And now here I am, 12 years later, learning new things, sharing it with a new generation of people. It's weird how they trick you into learning stuff at school, I guess. That will wrap up this episode of TSAN After Dark. Be sure to check back in next Tuesday on TSAN Tuesday for another video, dropping every week at 3 p.m. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, belowthecollar.com/TSAN. Check us out wherever you can find us. And never stop hunting for the truth. Never stop questioning what you've been told. We'll see you guys next time, After Dark.